Hi again, everyone. So I finished the screencast and then realized the last one stopped recording at 15 minutes. So I'm going to try to make this next one 15 minutes. I was just talking about E.D. Hirsch and how his list didn't really necessarily include a diverse amount of ideas or everyone's perspective about what should be included in a list of something all Americans should know to be culturally literate. It was bias, just as anyone who tries to make a list like that would be. And so then I would ask you again, I talked about this continuum discussion we would do in class, after looking at that list and thinking about, well, how could you make a list like this? I would ask you again in that continuum discussion, so does that mean you think that social studies should be fact-based or issue-centered? Because a lot of people would say also that E.D. Hirsch's list got out of date really fast. A lot of us in 2018 who consider ourselves to be culturally literate wouldn't know everything on that list because a lot of those things are outdated. And so something else to think about as far as what should be included in the social studies curriculum and how it should be based. All right, so you read a lot of interesting articles for today, and unfortunately we won't be able to discuss them in class, but we'll try to do so next week. But hopefully as you're reading those articles, you were thinking about this idea that social studies education is supposed to be supporting civic education, supposed to be cultivating citizens for a democracy. And those articles got into some specifics and hopefully pushed you to think a little bit further of, well, what does that mean? Does that mean we are cultivating patriotism in our students? And if so, are we cultivating authoritarian patriotism or democratic patriotism? The Westheimer article talked about that a lot, and we'll talk about the differences between those next week. Also, if we're talking about cultivating citizenship, does that mean we want to cultivate personal responsible citizenship? Does that mean we want to cultivate participatory citizenship? Or does that mean we want to cultivate more justice-oriented citizenship where citizens are actually looking at injustices and how to make them better from a systemic standpoint? So in this class, I take the lens that we want to, and you don't necessarily have to agree with this, I want everybody to kind of think about their own goals for social studies and for why they're teaching democratic education in schools at all. But in this course, we kind of take the view that we want to encourage and cultivate democratic patriotism, where students are questioning things and wanting to work to make them better. And we want to cultivate, of course, responsible citizens, participatory citizens, but also justice-oriented citizens who, again, are questioning and trying to make things better within our democracy. And so that leads us to this question of, okay, if we take this route that we want students to be citizens who are cultivating a better democracy, what does that mean we need to include in our social studies curriculum? Does it mean that we need to bring in some controversy into our curriculum because it's part of those ideas of making the world a better place? And many of us say that. We say we want to be teachers to make the world a better place. And so that leads us to the main topic of today, which is controversial issues. And so in this next part of class, what I would have you do is take out a piece of paper, it can be just a notebook paper, and write down some controversial issue that you are most uncomfortable with teaching in your class or just talking about with kids. And then don't put your name on it, and I would have you crumple those up and throw them to the middle of the room. Then we'd have all these little snowballs in the middle of our room. And then I would ask each of you to get up and grab one snowball from the room and bring it back to your desk and discuss it with your neighbor. What issue was on that paper? Is it something that you're uncomfortable with too? Why are you uncomfortable with it? This is a snowball discussion is a great strategy for helping students to discuss things that they might want to be anonymous talking about, and to really help students focus on the ideas of what their classmates feel or think about something rather than focusing on the person. So I can tell you that when we do the snowball discussion, I've done this now for, gosh, 8 years, and the two issues that always come up with pre-service teachers that are what they're uncomfortable with teaching, one is race, and the second is LGBT issues. And I'm going to assume that many of you wrote down one of those two as well. All right, so I have a PowerPoint that I'm going to switch to here now about specifically about controversial issues. So let me get going. All right, so hopefully you can see that now. So what is and should be the role of controversial topics in K through 6 curriculum and social studies specifically? Well, first, as we think about that, I know many of you are scared and uncomfortable and you're like, I'm never going to teach about controversial issues in elementary school because I am scared to death of that. Maybe you really read that Salas article really resonated with you about being afraid of getting fired or upsetting someone. That's okay. But I want to get you to engage with the idea of it just a little bit longer before you decide you're never going to teach about controversial issues, because as we get further in this course, you might realize that no matter what, we are always making decisions that have bias in a school curriculum. We're always deciding what's valued over what's not. And second of all, that bringing in some controversial issues that are appropriate for your content and your goals might be something that you have to do in order to do a good job teaching that content and towards those goals. So keep thinking about it. But first, I want to talk with you about different types of controversial issues, because that might help you feel a little bit better about it. So there are 3 types of controversial issues. There are factual controversial issues, there are definitional controversial issues, and there's value definitional controversial issues. So a factual controversial issue is the facts of the case. So are people having different legitimate viewpoints about the facts of something? Okay, so is something happening? Is it not? What happened, etc. So that we think about our history in the United States or the world, there are some things that are still a factual controversy. We don't know for sure what happened. There are other things that almost everyone 100% agrees this is what happened. Okay. There's also definitional controversy. So this is a disagreement over the meaning of terms. So what exactly are we talking about? The first example we'll go over is global warming. So is there a definitional controversy about what global warming even is? What is the definition of it? And the third type of controversial issue is a value controversial issue. So this is a disagreement about like prioritizing things, what is right, what is wrong, or what we should even do about the controversy. And so a lot of our controversial issues tend, even if they're not a factual controversy or not even a definitional controversy, a lot of our real controversies reside in that values definition or the values type of controversy. All right, so there's also what we consider open versus closed controversial issues. So the Hess article that many of you read gets into this a little bit about what is an open controversial issue versus what is a closed controversial issue. So if something is open, it has multiple competing legitimate viewpoints. If an issue is closed, it is a question that has just one viewpoint and almost everybody is behind or agrees with that one viewpoint. One thing that we will keep considering is what is the role of education and the role of schools in opening and closing certain controversial questions or issues. For example, and these change throughout history, and it's super interesting to think about this. So for example, marijuana in the 1800s was a closed question. It was a closed issue of if it should be legal or not. It just was legal. It was a regular trade product. And nobody was really even talking about it. That it just was what it was. And it was used in various different ways. And then because of some international things that happened, it became illegal to trade with. And all of a sudden, should marijuana be outlawed became a closed question in the opposite direction. Everybody just was on board with it's illegal, it's bad, that's a closed question. Well, just in the last 20 years or so, we've seen that question open up again. Should marijuana be legal? And it's opened up in a variety of ways through, should medicinal marijuana be legalized? Should recreational marijuana be legalized? And so it's closed and been opened and closed again and opened again throughout the course of American history, which is really interesting. But not so much with marijuana, but with other issues and questions. Schools have played a role and education has played a role in opening and closing issues. So 100 years ago, if schools should be integrated, excuse me, hold on one second. All right, sorry about that. I had to talk to my kids about yelling in the background. So other issues, other questions such as should schools be integrated? 100 years ago, that was a closed question. And one of the places where people started talking about if schools should really be integrated and opening that question up for discussion were in schools, were with teachers. And so what role did schools and teachers then play once schools were integrated in the 1950s, although some didn't become integrated until the 70s? What role did schools and teachers play in saying, yes, this is what should happen, this is justice, and closing that issue again? There are not very many people that we would consider having legitimate viewpoints that would say that schools shouldn't be integrated today. Now, there's still an open question about the question of if we really do have integrated schools. We still live in very segregated communities, which in turn segregate many of our schools. So that's an open controversy. But this issue of should schools be integrated? Should all students be allowed to come through the doors of a school building? That is a closed question, and schools and teachers played a role in closing that question, which I think is really interesting. All right, so we're thinking about what type of controversial issues we have, and we're also thinking about if those are open or closed questions, okay? So let's do some examples here. Global warming. So is the question of global warming an open or closed issue? Well, let's talk about different types of controversial issues. Is it a factual controversy? Most scientists would agree, 99-point-something% of scientists would agree that global warming is actually happening, okay? So I think on the factual level, that issue is closing. Now, definitionally, what's causing it, what it even is, maybe that is a little bit more open. And the value controversy is definitely still open within our democracy about what should we do about this. If this is happening, what should we even do? Should we try? Should there be laws that are trying to reduce global warming? That is an open controversy. Vaccinations. This is a really interesting one and a controversy and a question that opened and closed fairly quickly in the last so many dozen years or so. So should we get our kids vaccinated? Is that an open or closed issue? It was a closed issue for a long time. And right about the time I had my son, about 9 years ago, it opened again because there was a research report that was published that said that there might be links of vaccinations to autism. And so it became a really open issue of should we be doing this? Now, since then, again, science has helped us close that factual issue. So it's becoming closed again. Most scientists agree that those links don't exist. But are there still some value controversies about this? There are, because there's still people who say, okay, so even if scientists agree that there isn't these links between autism and vaccination, should the government still get to decide to tell me what to do with my body or what vaccinations to give my child? Should that be a law that you have to do that? So I would say that's still an open controversy. All right, so votes for women, women's suffrage. So women getting a chance to vote in our democracy. Open or closed issue? What would you say? I think in the United States, most people would say that's a closed issue. Of course, women have the right to vote and should have the right to vote. Now, around the world, that's not necessarily a closed issue. And so if we look at the different types of controversies, factually, it's a closed issue in the United States. Definitional, it's pretty much a closed issue of what that means. But a value, like what should we be doing with women around the world who don't have equal rights to their male counterparts of their country? What should the U.S. or citizens within the United States be doing about that? That would be an open value controversy because there are legitimate competing viewpoints on that. Now, we know that there are lots of open controversies in regards to other things, surrounding gender. There are lots of open controversies in regards to what the definitions of sexual harassment, the definitions of sexual assault, to what extent women are discriminated against in various different ways. So we know that there's lots of other open controversies in regards to gender, but not necessarily with voting for women. Child